So just want to welcome everyone, both here in the office and online. One of the topics that sort of generated a bit from yesterday's symposium, and it's been a discussion point with a few customers over sort of the last 6 weeks, is about starting an innovative culture inside the organisation, and then what Fusion5 are doing with a new offering process called our FastFive. So I just wanted to take the opportunity today with Shannon to introduce people into it, sort of like give some high levels, and then off the back of it, the goal is if this is something that interests people, then we can talk about a more in-depth engagement from that perspective. Cool. So with that, I'll hand over to Shannon. But any questions, either sort of jump in where possible, or just type them into the chat, or just let me know later on.
Yeah, it's a small group, so just please feel empowered to ask questions. And let's kick this off. Yeah, so like Andrew said, I just want to introduce FastFive to you guys. I've taken one of the screenshots. I think, you talk about innovation and hot dog water. Jeepers, that's got to be the worst innovation I've ever heard. So I've added it to my screen of bad innovation. This is a good mashup. But I guess in some ways it's cheeky, but I think in other ways, I think we are all very innovative, and everyone is capable of innovation. I think sometimes people back away from it. People won't articulate an idea for whatever reason or another. Like when I invented Facebook before it started, I didn't tell anyone. And no, just kidding. but I think we should all feel empowered enough to have ideas. And what we're trying to do with FastFive is create a mechanism by which we can capture people's innovation ideas. We put them through a bit of a mixer to work out which ones will actually bring some ROI or actually make a difference to the business. And quite often innovation is not about ROI. Sometimes it's about safety, and sometimes it's about our people. It doesn't just have to be about money, I believe. And then quite often when it's about safety and when it's about people, it has a much better chance of making it all the way through to production. So yeah, I just think everyone is very capable of innovation, and even in this small session, I encourage everyone to speak up. But when we run these sessions, hopefully you'll see that we have a number of different ways of extracting innovation ideas out of our customers, and when we run these workshops, and then hopefully you'll see that we've got also a creative way of turning them into prototypes and measuring them. I do like a good quote, and I think this is clever for an innovation workshop, and that's Thomas Edison, and he have not failed, he's just found 10,000 ways that won't work. This shows how we like to, this is our 5 mechanisms of building what we call an opportunity statement. So at Fusion5, we have 5 mechanisms of finding opportunity statements, and then we turn them into what is a design thinking, idea to action, ideation loop. And so the 5 mechanisms by which, and I'm going to go through each of these just quickly in their own individual slides, but we look at, I think education is a fantastic way of finding ideas for a business, and then we look at what's called the emotional opportunity framework. And so that's another, and you'll see a canvas and how we go through, and that builds opportunity statements. We'll talk about ethnography, which is a fancy word for building empathy or spending time with customers, so going out in the field. And this is someone that's unfamiliar with the environment and unfamiliar with the processes, and sitting down with end users and seeing what they do and actually experiencing that. And understanding when they're not happy with the processes that they go through, writing it all down and going back to the business and showing you. So really embedding yourself in an organisation and coming up with unique ideas. Finally, leadership. A lot of good ideas, and we may, not everyone on the call might be managers, not everyone's managers, but leadership and managers hold purse strings. And they do have good ideas, and they have good conversations. And so there are some big benefits in listening to the leadership team and listening to managers, because quite often they're also going to be the ones that are going to facilitate ideas to get all the way through to production. And so involving them and giving them a voice in this process is really important too. And then finally, I'm going to just give you a quick demonstration of a mobile application that we've developed in-house, and it's available free to anyone, and it's called Water Cooler, and it enables you to have well, I'll show you when we do it, but it's a cool mobile application which encourages conversation around innovation. I talked about we build these opportunity statements, and this is the framework for an opportunity statement, and I'll tell you why we define it like this. So what we try and do with any innovation idea that you come up with, no matter how it gets created, whether it's education, whether it's ethnography, we try and build out opportunity statements. And it is we struggle with the business challenge because of our inability to operational limitation, and this issue would be resolved if we could new capability, which could be implemented via a technical solution. And we frame it like this on purpose so we can get to the reason we've come up with this idea, the business limitation. So we're doing some what, how, why analysis. And when we build out these statements, so if you have a great idea that I want to put I want to measure the temperature of a thing in the field, we actually phrase it like this in this like language, so that we can go through and sequence and sort these later. But if we looked at KFC and maybe running out of chicken, and there's a funny example about this, we struggle with providing chicken to our customers because of our inability to manage our supply chain. This would be resolved if we could understand our supply chain better, which could be implemented by real-time metrics and accurate forecasting. So when we have these ideas, if we build out these statements in a consistent way, it allows us to easily sort them, sequence them, triage them, and choose the ones that are going to make the most benefit to the business. Another example might be we struggle with inconsistent production throughput because of our inability to ensure reliability on the shop floor. This would be resolved if we would know our machinery was going to break before it actually did, and that could be fixed by predictive maintenance. And then we go, and that's our opportunity statement. We're not solving it now. We're just recognizing where our innovation opportunities might be, and then we put that into the mix down the track. So I guess what I will go through now is the first step of our innovation technique is to gather opportunity statements or innovation opportunities. Then we go through and we sort them, and we also define our success criteria. So when we sort our ideas, it allows us our opportunities, it allows us to, I guess, understand them without solving them, understand the needs, which is really important, sequence them, but then before you've solved the problem, you define your success criteria. And we will talk about this soon, so that we know how we're going to measure the end product before we've actually defined it. And that's really important because we have to accept failure and we have to measure our success. And you can see in our creation loop, we have to continually test our end product and then maybe refine it or maybe just chuck it out because it's not going to work. But we have to be ready for failure, and we have to accept failure as part of a process because we're being much more agile in what we're doing. And I guess importantly, you want to, I'll go through these 5 mechanisms of finding innovation opportunities, but it's the right tool for the right job. And some things might suit your business, some things might not suit your business, but I think it's choosing a mechanism, and there are a bunch of them, which suits your business. So quickly about gathering. I'm sure you're all familiar with this. I know it's terrible with me. You see a new piece of technology and it's super exciting, and I want to get involved and I want to implement it, and I think it's going to solve the world's problems vis-a-vis blockchain, and then we implement it, or you look at how actually practically difficult this is, and it has to be public, and all these things are just don't suit me. And you go through this trough of disillusionment, and then you work out, well, actually, maybe there are some decent use cases. And so then, and this happens with anything. You look at IoT, you look at a new ERP, you look at a new CRM, you get oversold, you're a bit disillusioned, but then you get through, and you're realizing some value, potentially not where you thought that it initially might be, but you can still recognize some value. And innovation sometimes is even higher highs and lower lows. And what we want to try and do with a framework is make sure that, yeah, look, I don't mind. We don't want over expectations, but you need a little bit of hype. You want to lower that profit disillusionment, and you want to make productivity higher. And so if you put a framework around ad hoc innovation, I think you can flatten this out a little bit and make it end a little bit higher. Oh, so there's some cheeky name, and the Fusion5 innovation hype cycle. So we've done some renaming there. Clever. So what we do, as I said before, and as the first slide indicated, we have these 5 mechanisms of gathering innovation opportunities. Then we put them through the mix. We sort them, sequence them, and see what we want to do. This slide, get all these slides at the end. You can see, as IT people, quite often we don't like to talk about emotions, but as IT people, we have to recognise that quite often those are the things that will get these ideas through to production. Okay, like if you can hone in on an emotional need, if this really annoys someone, or if there's a process that makes someone feel safe or makes someone feel better, when you can tap into that emotion, quite often it's more likely to get through to production. And so some of what we do, some of these techniques are about recognising, if you said to your boss, what keeps you up at night? Like what is the thing that's worrying you today, tomorrow? And if you could put that down as something that you're going to address, and look at technologies and look at things around that could address that emotional need, it's probably a good thing, and it's probably something that could get through to production. And so we, as technical people, we do avoid that, but sometimes we don't have to. And so this technique is that this is the emotional opportunity canvas, and again, you get all these slides. So you can actually do this yourself, but this is part of our workshop where we do a little bit of training about this. We talk about what we want to do, and then for your business, we fill out what are the macroeconomic things that could affect your business. So we might look at things like the exchange rate, things like GPD, like the GDP. Anyway, so all of the security things that are statutory implications of what's going on, tariffs. We look at your suppliers. Maybe you've got not enough suppliers, too many suppliers. Maybe you're getting bad product from your suppliers, etc. So we start writing all these things down in terms of industry drivers. And we think of what I like to do is I go straight to trigger events. And I talked before about that emotional, what keeps you up at night? Like, is it the supply chain? Is it that you're worried that, let's think about KFC. If you own KFC, what's the worst thing that could happen at KFC?
Chicken.
Well, that's bad, but what's a really bad thing that could happen? Yeah, they said so. So someone died because they ate your chicken, because they got salmonella, and that is a terrible thing. So you put that down, and then is that a supplier issue? Like that could be something to do with your suppliers. It could be something internal with your processes, but you could write down all the things that could have contributed to that. And then you look at how, and so these why things, this is like leadership and management, they're the ones that worry about poison chicken. Not many other people do. But then how is the managers, how can you make this not occur? So how can you prevent that poison? And you might think there's, more accurate supply chain, more testing, whatever you might want to do there. And then the desired new capabilities to never have that occur. So this trigger event, we never want that to occur. And then what? So this is the doers, the people, how is the managers, the why of the leadership team, and then what are we going to do to prevent that from occurring again? And that might be measuring the temperature of the chicken all the way through the supply chain. That might be testing bacteria at the end of the whatever that's going to be. The what is the lowest level of implementation of this idea. And that's generally what people are going to program or people are going to actually affect at the end of the day. And so if we were to look at something completed in a read environment, And again, we do this as individuals for your businesses, and we look at your specific problems and we address your specific needs. And that's for the people in the room. Now, what I recommend is you don't just have technical people in the room. You have a spread of people, because they have a share of different problems, and they have a different vision of the business. And so then they have they have a different list of whys, they have a different list of hows, and they have a different list of whats. But in terms of digital innovation, and what we try and do is we try and get, and again, it's just opportunities at this stage. We're not solving the problems yet. We're trying to find ways that we might solve the problem. Okay, so maybe we could use a chatbot, or like it gets to the fact that in some of these situations we get to, well, we don't know our customers well enough, so we have to do some social listening. And it's a broad-based statement like social listening. But then when we get to our prototyping workshop, we talk about all the different mechanisms how you might do that. So we look at the Microsoft products, we look at the Oracle products, we could look at Twitter listening and understand all the power that we could do to work out what our customers are saying about us in this retail area. It might be that people aren't seeing particular parts of your store, so that we could use different technologies to direct them to that piece of the store. We might have cameras in the roof to understand where the foot traffic's going, to work out how do we push people into the right areas. So these are the sorts of ideas that you want to extract from doing this particular exercise. I do like to put this I use my outer chicken example quite a bit, but this actually happened to about 400 stores in the UK, and this was a viral campaign that went out afterwards. This is what KFC actually put out there, and they got billions of hits all around the world. Like, it was super successful, but that was their apology for running out of chicken. And that came down to, they just put on a new carrier, so a new logistics company was delivering their chicken. Massive problem in the 400 stores or so. Ran the chicken for days. They had to shut down the stores for days, and so it was a really big bad thing. But it's a good example of what's the worst thing that could happen. What could we have done to fix that? But their advertising campaign was very clever there. So that's the emotional opportunity framework, to try and find things in a structured sort of canvas way. The next thing I think is really important to find innovation ideas is education, and that is go to conferences, talk to your peers, look at what your competitors are doing, look at the news. I listen to technology podcasts. I'm a pretty boring person, but there's some, I subscribe to certain ones that I like. And I get some great information from there when I've got downtime, or when I'm commuting. Industry papers are really important. This is the way that you can find ways that you might put into that final column. Or what I always say also is, even if you find a nice piece of technology, you could look at that and say, how am I going to put that into the business? So IoT, how can I put this into my business? Look at a beacon, let's say, for example. So if I was to look at this, once again, this canvas here, I look at a beacon, and we all know I've spoken about these a number of times, but these, a $30, let's say, device that can send a signal within 200 meters and sort of accurately identify where something is with low energy Bluetooth. So that's essentially what it does. It's got a 3 to 5 year lifespan. And so you could stick that, because it's worth $30, you could stick that on that fire truck. And then anyone that has permissions and has a device that's looking for that particular signal, within 200 meters, they'll know where that is. Okay. And so just say we wanted to track all the assets on that truck, so this is a real situation where the New Zealand fireys go out, they do a job, and maybe 3 or 4 fire trucks come together, and then there's havoc and there's things going everywhere and hoses, and so that they get back to their stations and they've mixed up, they got someone's hose from a different station, so they mixed up their hoses. And but what that does is they're safety tagged, and they know the history of the asset, and it's got a limited lifespan. And this is really important stuff, because there's people's lives are at stake, and so they're looking for a solution to say, well, their problem is we need accurate stock control of our vehicles, and they're looking at can they put active tags on every single thing in that truck, so that when that drives through this door, the receiver knows exactly what assets are on that truck as it drives through the door, and they know if they've got stuff from an incorrect station because it's centrally controlled, or the assets are centrally controlled. And so what I'm saying is we can look at little bits of technology like this, or a little bit of education, even what we're learning here today now, and go, how could I apply that back at my business? Because there's some pretty cool things here. Active tags, I didn't know that. They've got a range of 5 meters, let's say. We talked about LoRaWAN yesterday. Wow, that's got a range of 15 kilometers. So you can have one device just say, because I know a lot of you have got plants and things, you can have one device and it has a range of 15 kilometers. It can read sensors in that entire range. So that any sensor within 15 kilometers talks to a single base station, and then that's connected to your internal network, and then that can feed JD Woods or work orders or whatever it is. But just knowing these technologies are out there can give you more opportunities of solving problems back at work. So active tags, beacons, all sorts of things. So that's education. I think I just like to play a cool video so I don't have to speak for a while. Let's do this. I hope it works. Is it going to play? Oh. I'm hitting play. Oh, this is a shame. Oh, this was unfortunately I have to talk now. This is a video where Uber are doing facial recognition to improve the safety. So this is purely safety of the Uber system. And that is that when a driver logs in, I don't know if any of you are Uber drivers, but when an Uber driver logs into their app, there's facial recognition that ensures that they are the driver that they say they are. So it's very simple. It's on their device. Of course, they need a device to be an Uber driver. They have to log in, and it does facial recognition, so that ensures that when this Uber driver logs in and the location is the same, that is the driver that says he or she is picking you up. So it was a cool story about using Azure facial recognition services, easily plugged into a device. And I log into my laptop with facial recognition. It's such a cool piece of technology, and you can look at that as well and go, right, I'd like to make if everyone at work could log in like that, maybe that'd be quicker, easier, more effective. Of course, you've got to get past your security team. But again, a good example of education, knowing that these things are so easy to do these days, and you could log into JD with facial recognition, for example, if you had all these things set up correctly. So education is really important. We talked about another mechanism of gathering ideas is management, and that is managers, I think, look at your business and, or the leadership team, they might look at, and it's a nice way to divide your business into opportunities, and that's to engaging customers, empowering or protecting your employees, optimizing your operations, or transforming your products and services. So the leadership team, they'll generally look at safety, should look at safety, they might look at ROI, and they might look at profit and bottom line, and have ideas about improving that with innovation. But like I said, it's really important to get management across this and get managers buy-in, because they are the ones at the end of the day controlling the purse strings. But this is just a handy way of dividing an organisation. Once again, trying to find innovation opportunities. Think about how you engage your customers and how that could be improved with technology. Think about how you empower and protect your employees and what changes you could make. Some good examples of that I've seen is people tracking, and this is not for bad things. This is not for sinister reasons. This is pure safety reasons. So I know some of the one of the refineries here in Melbourne. We were recently involved in an RFI for them, and it was to do person tracking in the refinery. So they want to know exactly where every person is, so they have a tag on their helmet, and they can be tracked potentially through LoRaWAN or however that might work. But they can have a heat map of everyone on that site, and if there's ever an incident on that site, they know exactly where everyone is, and they can control safety of that site a lot easier. And so that's another, like from management, they might have this idea of, I want to know where everyone is, and there's maybe some productivity sinister reasons behind that, behind tracking people's movements, but human safety at the end of the day is the driver for putting in the system like that. And then that also feeds with and you've probably seen some really cool videos out there, but there's every public cloud provider does it. Microsoft does a really good one about facial recognition, about recognizing they're in a tool shed, and so there's a jackhammer and there's all these tools around, and there's a camera there, and it recognizes when someone leans something heavy against the wall that shouldn't be, and it sort of has an audible alert that you should change the position of that jackhammer. So it's got all the intelligence to recognize the various tools, to recognize the person. It was also doing something where, because it's got facial recognition, it can recognize that person doesn't have the training certificates to use a particular device on the site, and therefore it puts out warnings there as well. So some really amazing things. And facial recognition, there's a Microsoft application out there, like a kiosk app, that you can grab, and I should have had it up and running and working for us here, but it measures emotion. This is out of the box free. You can just set it up and run it on your laptop, and it will sit there and it'll tell you if you're smiling, tell you if you're sad. So it does an emotional recognition stuff. It'll guess your age, it'll guess your gender. It'll do all this stuff completely out of the box, free, right? And it'll identify someone as a unique face. So it won't go and say that's Shannon Moyer until you train it. But if I walk past the camera, it could count how many times I've walked past the camera as opposed to anyone else in the room, because it knows that it says this good or this unique face has been passed a number of times. And so measuring the traffic in a popular area or at a reception, they talk about the automated receptionist. That's the technologies that they're using. So there's all these opportunities. You look at a piece of technology, heaps of opportunities, whether it's safety, whether it's efficiency, et cetera, et cetera. But facial recognition is amazing. The fourth mechanism by which we have had a lot of success in finding innovation opportunities is ethnography. There's a definition of that, but that's where someone like me goes out in the van to fix power problems, and I'm in high vis, and I watch the people with their tablet, but they don't have a tablet, they have a piece of paper, and I listen to them using the radio, and I listen to all the confusion about nobody knows where the truck is and nobody knows where the next job is, and so I sit there going, oh my gosh, all these inefficient things, but it's just a normal day at work for these people. This is how they run. And I'm sitting there going, why don't you have GPS in the car, and why don't the dispatch don't even have GPS in all the cars, so they get a call come in, and it's, the power's out in a particular house. They don't even know who's closest. They don't know who's on the way back to the office. They don't know any of this data. And as an IT guy, I'm sitting there so frustrated going, oh my gosh, you've got all this data that you could be using to make these, at the end of the day, better, faster decisions, more efficient business. And so the ethnography is, you don't have to be a technical person to recognize these things. You just have to sit with someone, and so it's kind of that unfamiliarity thing, and you can make some big recognitions. So when we did this exercise, like I said, I got into my high vis, looked just like that, and went to North Power and sat. This is exactly what I did. I sat with dispatch. I went out and did a couple of jobs. Well, I didn't do anything. I sat in the ute. But we came out with about 35 different ideas or recommendations of how these processes could be improved. And that was basic stuff like they're using paper, basic stuff like the navigation to a job was just manual. There was no GPS tracking. All these things we could recognize as opportunities to make a difference. And it really is, it's that outsider looking in, and it's not being tainted with the old, that's not how we do things here. Because that's the classic thing, oh no, that's not how we do things here. But it can make a big difference as a fresh set of eyes. Although delivering those recommendations can sometimes be quite awkward as well, because hey, why don't you do this? We've tried that, it didn't work. But you know, you can document them, see how you go. The final thing we use to track innovation ideas, and I'm just going to show you our. See if this works. I'll show you our internal application. I don't want to see text to my daughter. Is it going to connect? That's all right. These are all good signs. Connecting, connected, authenticated. Show me your screen. Okay, so this is my phone. And so what the team did is they wrote this application called Water Cooler. And the idea behind the name is people stand around the water cooler and have a conversation. And so that's what this is. And if you log in for the first time, if there was any ideas that I hadn't voted on, they would come up on my front screen. But if I go to the Ideas tab, we have a bunch of categories. And as I said, this is free to download. This is available on the app like Android and iPhone. If you're the first person to register your email domain, so just say you had tees.com.au, you'd be the admin of that site. You could get everyone to log in with that same, with their Tees domain email address, and they can be part of this. And then they can quite simply start, maybe take a photo, have an idea of maybe some innovation, maybe an improvement anywhere. It can be categorized. So as the first person that logs in, you could have safety, you could have IT, you could have processing, you can have all different categories. And then anyone in the business has the opportunity to put an idea. And here's one that I put in. So this was, I was sick of, why if I put bananas at Coles, I put bananas on the scale, why do I have to find bananas on the screen when there should be a camera there that could do AI and know that that's bananas, and I shouldn't have to do anything right? So that was my idea. Nobody said it's good, and nobody voted on it. But you can see that if I was someone else, I could swipe left or swipe right, so you either like it or you don't like it. So it's like Tinder, but it's not Tinder. And you can put comments as well. So you say, yeah, that's a dumb, usually people say that's a nice idea. But you can say, I don't like it or I like it. And so what that does is it gives, as managers in a category, you've actually got some commentary, you've got likes and not likes, and you could sort by likes. And then maybe you could say to the business, I will do a prototype on the top 5 ideas that in it, or the top 5 idea, or the top idea in each category that you create, or something like that. So it just encourages people to maybe share ideas. Super simple because it's on your phone. You're with it all the time. You log in, you could like or dislike a few ideas, and away you go. So that's what we did. Oh, I don't know if there's any. I'm trying to find if there's other functionality. So comments. Because I've voted on everything, I can't really show you, but you can also see how many likes and dislikes each of the ideas has. So this has been going for a while at our organisation, and there's some neat ideas. There's others like we should just have craft beer in the fridge. That wasn't interesting. I accepted it. But yeah, you can look at, and you can, or there's sorting, there's everything. But it's just a clever way of encouraging people at work to contribute to innovative ideas. Oh, sorry. Let me go back to slideshow. And so what we've done is we may have used all 5 of those techniques. We're definitely going to use the emotional opportunity framework. We're definitely going to, we might do ethnography at your site, like we'd have a conversation about how you want to frame up an engagement. So, but what we've got is we've got a pile of innovation opportunities at the end of this, and our goal in FastFive is to turn that, we want to find the best 5 ideas, and then we want to turn them into prototypes, okay? And so what we tend to do now is we sort them, and as a collective group, we sort them, and that could be using some sort of voting application, that could be using a voting, we could use a website, we could just collaboratively get together in a room, which I prefer, and sort the ideas. And what that does is it makes us think about all of them equally. Do you know what I mean? Like, just having a list of ideas isn't good, but if we actually try and sort them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we start to think of the benefits of all the ideas, and we all can hopefully agree on a sequence, because what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and choose the top 5 ideas. And there's a lot of reasons for sorting, but sorting is really important to actually get everyone to understand each of those ideas. And the 2 bottom things is very important too, is that we're not solving the problems. They might be super difficult problems that someone's listed as an opportunity for innovation. We're not solving them now, we're sorting them. We're trying to find out what's going to give the best impact to the business, or we're trying to find which idea is going to create the safest environment possible, or potentially save lives, or whatever we're going to do. That's how we want to sequence our ideas or our opportunities. And this is also the time when we define our success criteria and how we're going to be measured. And it's really important to do that now, not when you're actually designing it, because people start to get much more emotional. You've got this, you've got this emotional debt. You've got this because people are invested in it. So it's really nice to define your measuring criteria before that occurs. So it's just an opportunity at this stage. So maybe our opportunity is we want to measure the temperature of a motor in the field, so that when it gets too hot, we can shut it down. So that could be the idea. That's great. And when it's raw like that, we can easily go, oh yeah, well that'll make a big difference. And so that success will be that if we could do it for less than $1,000, then we can do it. That shouldn't take more than 3 days of coding. And so if you define those criteria now, before we've got emotional and before we're really in the process, it's much easier to measure the success of that project when we start to implement. So I recommend defining success criteria before we actually get into that prototype loop. And remembering that a prototype could be a piece of cardboard, it could be a whiteboard, but it doesn't have to be a physical device. But defining what's going to be physically apparent, really good to do that early on. So we go through and we try and we put success criteria and we put the measurement criteria on all of our top 5 ideas. So we've sequenced them. We only do it for the top 5 because there's no point in this does take time, so you don't want to do too many of your ideas in this way, but you take your top 5 because you've already sorted them, and then we go through and we define our success criteria for that. Now we get into what we call the creation phase, and this is classic design thinking. And we heard Nick Abrams. We heard Nick talk about design thinking, and his quick take on that, and I support that somewhat, is that you are designing like it's human-centric design, and that is, I guess that is the definition of design thinking. On this, I think I've got some references to, it's called D School. So design thinking that's not a Fusion5 thing, it's a worldwide way of rapidly putting ideas to action, right? So, and there's a really cool website, D School, which takes you through workshops and takes you through different stages, and they have a few more stages. But our process, the design thinking from D School and most other design thinking, is all about empathy. So, and we talked about empathy before, about ethnography and finding that emotional connection. But D School is all about that empathy, getting the ideas that are going to last and putting them through this rapid loop. So putting them through ideation, which is the cool bit. That's when we get to solve the problems. That's the bit I really enjoy. So you go through ideation, you go through prototyping. And remember, prototyping, it could just be like, if we once again, if we use a simple example, I want to do a cycle count on a mobile application. Ideation might be, okay, so we just wireframe and we say we need to choose a cycle count number. We need to, we need a barcode scanner, which we saw in the example. We need a quantity field. It's going to be on an Android device, and we talk about this, and then we might even bring a user in. We might bring a warehouse person and go, so what about this? Do you think this would work? And they go, no, or it needs to be rugged, or we don't have barcodes on everything, and then we go, oh, don't have barcodes on anything. No, of course, right, next. So do you know what I mean? Like, so we can quickly, well, that's a fail. let's try something else, or that will encourage us to maybe, okay, so we've got to barcode everything, or we need to put location codes everywhere, or we need to use QR codes, and so that would change things, and maybe that's a different project in itself to get that up and running. But it's the idea that a prototype, just remember that a prototype, even testing and the definition of what you're trying to achieve, doesn't necessarily mean a line of code gets written, okay? It's a conceptual thing. And this is a really good way to get your users involved, because I think the earlier you get users involved, also you get better traction and better buy-in in the long run. So, so for each of our top 5 ideas that we've discovered and that we think is going to go the distance, we do a level of prototyping and a level of ideation and testing. And so ideation could include, right, so it could be a choice of software, it could be a choice of device. There's a lot of detail that you can put into this to try and get it to a stage where the next thing is pulling the trigger on an actual proof of concept. Okay? So we try and put as much detail in here so that let's be honest, at the end of the day, we do need to try and define a scope. We need to try and get a dollar value out of this exercise for each of the top 5 ideas, because you're not going to get our management to pull the trigger on this unless they know what they're in for in terms of costs. We've got we've defined the measurement, so we've defined our success criteria also. That could get further refined. So your success criteria might get further refined as we prototype and test, because it might, morph and change, but that's fine as well. But at the end of the day, to get approvals for this to go to the next phase, which is POC, we need to get, some sort of budgetary idea. And then we'll probably have some benefits analysis, so some return on investment. So they're the things that we want to make sure that we've got a dollar cost, and then we've got ROI. ROI is difficult to measure quite often in this innovative life cycle, but ROI is really important. Whether it's a dollar value ROI, whether it's just benefits to the business, sometimes it's hard to measure. But if you're going to take an innovation idea or 5 innovation ideas to management, you absolutely need some basic metrics to get it approved. Because what we find is, I think even Nick or a lot of people talk about this, they get innovation burnout. Like people have got these good ideas, but they're not getting put into action. Sometimes that's the business has to make a commitment or a plan to say, okay, we're going to spend 25 grand on innovation this year. We're going to track these ideas, and that's our budget for code and everything. And we can find 5 ideas that fit within that framework, and the business will see that you're actually committing and you're doing something. But sometimes it takes a brave move to put a budget on it and then put it through a cycle like this and see what can drop out the other end. I think where an organisation like Fusion5 comes in handy for this type of exercise is when we're going through the ideation, prototype, test, definition phase. We're thinking of production, and that's what I encourage you to think of production as well. So we're putting in a design, or we're making sure that this prototype, the data will go to the cloud and it'll be ready for AI. And so when we have that level, like the people that perform these tasks at Fusion5, put a level of maturity into the design so that there will be benefits down the track. So if we're talking about data tracking, or if we're talking about IoT, we're conscious of strategically where that data is going to end up, so that you'll always be able to tap into that down the track. We're conscious of doing things in the cloud, so that if it's a good idea or if it works, you can rapidly expand that into production. So they're important. Like you can do a prototype, and you could write a piece of code that sits on a computer in there and can run for one person, and then when management says, okay, well, let's get that live, you have to totally re-engineer it, right? But that could be done, and we encourage us at Fusion5 to maybe do that in the cloud. So maybe do everything in the cloud, connect back to your work, and then when management says, well, let's trigger that. Guess what? The cloud's ready to expand to 10,000 people or to 5,000 people, or whatever that might be. So just say you measure the temperature of one device, but you've got 5,000 of them. the prototype you can get to production a lot more rapidly because a lot of those expansion things are being thought of. So that's another important thing to remember, that if you're going to do a proof of concept, that the proof of concept can be rolled out into production effectively. So so that's what we try and do when we are going through this ideation process, to make sure that it's sort of production proof. And again, when we look at our J.D. Edwards architecture, when we have these great ideas, we have our central source of truth. We're considering, we talked yesterday about a data-centric design. We know where our master data is, so we've got a master data layer here. And if a piece of equipment in the field is sending us data, we have a pre-existing integration layer. Now, that could be using just orchestration, as we talked about yesterday. You could have middleware. It doesn't really matter. But we have these consistent mechanisms of connecting central source of truth to our innovation ideas, which are hopefully giving us the ability to make better, faster decisions. So this information life cycle goes through these consistent layers to J.D. Edwards, because we're a J.D. Edwards group here, to enable us to make these better decisions. And so that's part of the design as well. It's all well and good to have a standalone system here, but you do want to get that enterprise advantage out of the insights that you're gathering here. And so, that important insights engine reporting off your single source of truth is critical. These innovation activities, again, they don't have to be J.D. Edwards focused. You might have total blue sky thinking and have an idea that's got nothing to do with J.D. Edwards, but we still are conscious of where the data is going to end up and you being able to extract value from that data. And then I just had just a couple of ideas of, once again, how you might perform. We talked about the fire engine example before. It could be IoT. And this is the sort of prototyping that can come out from an idea. So the idea might be that we want the location of a truck. The customer, and part of the workshop is, when you do these workshops, you say, oh, we've got a pre-existing relationship with Azure, and it's like, oh, cool. Okay, so we'll use the Azure IoT Hub. That will feed an Azure data lake. We'll use Azure machine learning to farm that data. Blah 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 blah. So it's quite customized to your technical environment and your capabilities, and where your whether it's J.D. Edwards or where your footprint is. These things are great for dipping your toes into cloud as well. If you don't have big cloud investments, sometimes one of the overarching themes you might say is, well, everything we do is going to be in the cloud, and so that can really benefit a quick architecture of extracting those benefits from the scenarios that we identify. And that's really, I guess we could, I should have a summary slide, not just the end slide. But I think if we go back to, if I just go back to the first slide and just reiterate some of those. So we just look at this again. This should be my final slide. But hopefully what we've shown here, this was just meant to be a real introduction, but we have a templated way of coming in, finding and defining our opportunities, our innovation opportunity statements, and by those, 5 structured mechanisms, we do the sorting and the sequencing of those opportunity statements to find the 5 that will make the most benefit to our business. We define our success criteria at that stage, and then we put them through this prototype loop. So that we can choose which ones we might actually prove the concept at the end of the day. So that's what we try. That's what one of our FastFive engagements attempts to do. A mix of people in the room. You don't just have technical people from Fusion5. You have a mix of Fusion5 people. You have a mix of people from your business. We try and thrash it out in a day. We get as much done as possible, and then the deliverables come in time. But the goal is to get, what the business wants is, can we do 5 proof of concepts? That's what we try and give you the recipe to get 5 successful proof of concepts, so that you might get approval for those. Are there any questions about what I've just shown you, or FastFive, or the school design thinking? Anyone online? You're able to ask questions as well.
It's all quiet.
Very quiet. Maybe it's not working.
No, we're now checking.
No, it's working. No, it's working. It's all good. It's Melanie here. It's all good.
That was a joke. No, that's good.
Okay, so just want to thank Shannon for doing this. I know people are getting a lot of information over the last couple of days. There's been a lot of content getting thrown people's ways. But off this, go back, go through it, reach out to myself, reach out to your account manager that's aligned with you, ask questions. If you want to go into this in more detail and do some specifics for your sites, let us know, we can sort that out. I've recorded this, so I'll send a copy out to people so they can get this information and talk about it internally. Otherwise, yeah, so thanks for coming along. I know
the slides will be shared as well. So
yeah.
The slides from this as well as yesterday, all
yeah.
those are shared.
Yeah, so there'll be a lot of content coming out over the next sort of 6-8 weeks as well. As I get it, I don't want to send it all out as one. They're going to be, for those that attended last year, it was like one every sort of like 8 to 10 days. There was another one article, and they were all based around presentations, but we'll add some extra ones in based on, the security workshop on Tuesday, this session, the orchestration session that's on our list, that sort of stuff. So, but at the end of the day, if you're not sure who to talk to, just ping me. So I'm not doing much, so that's all right. Cool. All right. Thanks, Shan.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.